with that?
Just mumbling to myself.
I put the laptop over here.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the regular Planning Commission meeting of April 11th to order at 6 p.m. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Commissioner Crafton,
Here.
Commissioner Seals,
Here.
Commissioner Burney. Oh.
So, Mr. Chair, if I'm interpreting her face, she needs to call the Commissioner Burney and maybe the attorney to get them online. I'm not sure.
We can pause for a minute.
Please enter your participant. Please say your name, followed by the pound key. The moderator has not yet joined the conference. Please enter your participant. Please say your name, followed by the pound key.
Commissioner Burney, are you there? Commissioner Stafford?
Present.
Is anyone there?
This is Holly Wells. I'm here as the attorney.
Is anyone from Wal-Mart on the phone?
Geoff Solomonson, I'm with Galloway. I'm on the line.
Thank you.
Mag Porter, also from Galloway, on the line.
Commissioner Crafton, can you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Does the commission have any adjustments to tonight's meeting agenda? If the commission would like to discuss anything under the consent agenda, such as the minutes, they need to be pulled out at this time and put under new business. Hearing no changes to the agenda will stand as presented. Do we have a report from the City Deputy Administrator?
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to just read this into the record since there are people online. So we are open for business, and what that means is we've got about 2,700 business licenses right now for either businesses here in Wasilla or operating in Wasilla. The Matsu Outdoorsman Show, we got some feedback. It was the best show they've had ever. The highest attendance, a lot of vendors, and so that was great. This next weekend is the Matsu Home Builders Home Show that's going to be at the Menard Center. We're extending our music in the park this year. It will be on Saturday nights. That will start the first part of June. And then our next steering committee meeting will be in April. A couple updates. We are about halfway through the airport master plan. That's a requirement by FAA for us to expand our runway and build out property. We've got $5.5 million of water and wastewater improvements that will be happening here this fall and first part of the spring that will primarily be wastewater. We've got a Quick Connect project. That's the first project that the City of Palmer and the City of Wasilla are doing to connect our water systems, primarily for pressure out by the hospital. And that will allow any kind of disaster that we would have if we lost pressure. It would allow us to pull off some pressure from their system. The Matsu Borough has given us about $3.5 million for their ARPA funds to be a partner in this project, and that will also allow us to start the conversation about expanding our water line down Trunk and over to Bogard. So we are also in the process of, there's a section out on Clapp Road by the airport, there's no power. And so we are supporting MEA in an application to FEMA to pull power down the rest of Clapp and then over to the airport, so we have backup power over at the airport. We're repairing the spruce and east to Sitna water towers. That's damage that was happened 2 years ago. We're just finalizing that. And we're also watching the Zone 4 over by Lowe's. We're watching that pressure. We did some engineering upgrades to those pump stations and switched out some valves and did some geotech work. So that zone seems to be doing pretty well up in that part. If you haven't heard about MS4, MS4 is a requirement that comes when you become an urbanized area instead of rural. We were rural until the census came out. Now we're considered urban. So we've got an MS4 requirement, which means we're going to have to monitor all of our water runoffs. We're going to have to do a significant amount of mapping of our utilities. It's going to be a really big lift for 2,500 customers, but we're working on digitizing our maps and doing all that reporting. And then we do have the MPO that's being set up by the borough. That's a municipal planning organization that you have to have once you become urbanized. And there's a cost for that. That will be, it will actually, according to Fairbanks, we spent a lot of time with Fairbanks, it allows federal money to go right to the MPO, right to us for maintenance of our roads. So it streamlines us so your maintenance money doesn't get stuck at DOT. So that's one of the advantages. We are continuing to work with Juneau with our alcohol licensing. Right now, we are not eligible for another brewery for 10 years. We are not eligible for another alcohol license for 7.5, because they will not give us a license unless we have, for every 1,500 residents of the city, they'll give us one full pour alcohol license. And the people are not moving in the city, they're moving outside the city. So we're working with AMCO to get that fixed, because we are dependent on sales tax, one of the few cities. We are doing airport tours, 4 or 5 a month. We've taken some manufacturers out there, some native corporations, some logistic companies that are looking for a venue to do the smaller Gold Streak packages out of a different location. The 4th of July parade and the mayor's picnic the portal is now available. If you want to have a float or you want to participate in that, you can go to the cityofwasilla.gov. We're celebrating America's heroes and the 30th anniversary of WPD. And last but not least, Menard Center is going to host the opening and closing ceremonies for the Arctic Winter Games in 2024. And if you want to have fun this weekend, you can go to Wasilla High School prom at the Menard Center. And if you really want to have fun, get a passport for the Parks and Recs. They're doing that passport program this summer to go around to all of our parks. So, long report, but thank you.
Thank you. City Attorney, do you have a report?
I have no report at this time. I will talk to you a little bit later about a pending revision to the code and a joint meeting that the council would like to have with the planning department. With the planning commission.
Thank you very much. City Planner, do you have a report tonight?
No, Mr. Chair, I don't have a report. Thank you.
Anyone wishing to step forward to discuss anything not on the agenda tonight can do so now. Please write your name and contact information on the sign-up sheet and state your name for the record.
Good afternoon, Commissioners and staff. My name is Stu Graham. I'm a resident of the city of Wasilla, also a member of the Wasilla City Council. I represent myself here tonight, not the council nor any views of the city. I just had one quick comment. Over the past 6 months or so, the code enforcement log has pretty much disappeared. What used to be a page of 20 or 30, sometimes even 2 pages of information about what the code enforcement officer was doing, who he was contacting, what the problems were within the city, that is down to 1 entry for the last couple of council meetings, or excuse me, the last couple of meetings that we've had here for the commission. I find that inappropriate, that we have somebody that we think a lot of and everybody says is doing a great job, but we have no idea what he's doing. So I would like to encourage the commission, to encourage the planner to make sure that that report is complete and reflects what's going on, so that citizens, when they pull up the packet, they can see the code enforcement log and they can see, yeah, we're consistently having issues in this area with dogs or with whatever the case may be. But for once a month to have a 1 entry code enforcement log, I think is not, I won't say it's not telling the truth, it's not telling the story of what's going on in our city. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to step forward and discuss anything not on the agenda tonight? Do so now.
Mr. Chair, just for clarification, anyone can speak to anything that's under committee of the whole, just not a scheduled public hearing item at this time, so in case the audience isn't sure. Because although it is on the agenda, the committee of the whole items, this is an opportunity to speak about those. But the 2 public hearing items, the Wal-Mart and the resolution, they would have to wait until
Wait until they're done talking, or?
wait till the item's called up, and then staff does their report, the applicant does their presentation, then the chair will call for public comment.
Okay.
Is anyone wishing to speak on the consent agenda? Do so at this time. Hearing no one, next item of business is the consent agenda. Need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Commissioner Stafford, I move we approve the consent agenda.
Commissioner Sajal, second.
There are no objections. The consent agenda is approved as presented. New business, Ms. Crawford, would you please introduce item 1 and provide your staff report, please?
Certainly, for the record, Tina Crawford, City Planner. Item 1 is conditional use permit number 23-01 with the associated resolution number 23-05. The applicant is Geoff Solomonson with Galloway and Company, representing Wal-Mart Real Estate Business Trust. The request is to construct a 6,345 square foot addition to the existing Wal-Mart store to allow online order customer pickup area. The lot is approximately 33.48 acres. It's located at 1350 South Seward Meridian Parkway. It is zoned commercial, and it is surrounded by commercial to the north, south, and east, with R1 single-family residential to the west, and it has a generally commercial/business future land use designation. That's part of your comprehensive plan. So in your package, beginning on page 9, going through 14, you have the staff report that provides staff's findings for all of the general approval criteria that the commission has to find that the applicant has met in order to approve it. Staff finds that with the proposed conditions of approval, the applicant does meet all of the criteria. You can see the proposed conditions on page 14 in your package. The first one is more of a housekeeping condition. It just states that all of the previous conditions of approval that were previously granted by the commission for Wal-Mart are still in effect and made part of this approval. The second one is a standard one, that the development must be consistent with the site and elevation drawings attached as Exhibit B. Any revisions have to be submitted for review and a determination whether they're substantial or minor modifications. Anything substantial will have to come back to the Planning Commission for review and approval. The third one is a landscape plan has to be submitted for the city planner for review and approval no later than May 31, 2023. The plan must meet the requirements for legal non-conforming commercial buildings that's found in Wasilla Municipal Code Section 16.33.030F and 16.33.060E. The reason they don't have a landscape plan at this time, it's a timing issue, but it's also because this is an existing non-conforming building, the landscape standards and that requirement for the plan aren't the same as you would normally see if this were a new business. So to keep this project moving rather than delay it on trying to decide, do they need to retrofit any landscaping, can they do it? This will give them time to look at that once the plantings come back. Based on my initial review of the aerial photographs, you can see one up on your screen. They are basically in compliance with their landscape plan from the previous approvals, and to do any additional landscaping other than maybe a couple pockets is probably not going to be possible because it would damage the root system of the larger shrubs and trees that they have already in place. But that'll all be reviewed and worked out between the applicant and city planner. The fourth criteria is that the Borough Fire Chief's office has to review this approval for compliance with fire codes and building codes. And the last one is, again, a standard one, that an as-built survey has to be submitted to the planning department after completion of the addition. So in your package on page 19 and 20, you have their site plan. I can pull them up on the screen if they're harder to read, or I can walk you through any of the applicant. I can pull them up when they're doing their presentation. I also included, I know that some of the comments, or a couple of the comments mentioned a berm from a previous approval. That's not addressed in the staff report in addition, and the reason for that is if the applicant did not, if Wal-Mart did not follow through on a condition of approval, that's a code compliance issue. It's not related to this approval that's in front of you today. But when I looked at the aerial photo and I gave you the contour map on page 17, it appears that there is a berm along the majority of that between the residential to the west. Again, if someone wants to put forward a code compliance complaint and state that they're not in compliance with their previous approvals, then the code officer would look at it at that time. You also have, again, it's just a site plan, it's addition on that northern end of the building, and they have the floor plans in there and the building elevations. And then your draft resolution is on page 69 through 77. It also incorporates the same conditions of approval that's in the staff's recommendation, but the commission can certainly amend any of the findings or the conditions of approval. So that's all that I have, unless there are any specific questions, and I'll be happy to, like I said, go up there and zoom in on any pictures if that's helpful for the commission.
Commissioners need any closer views?
Commissioner Sadio, no comments.
Would the applicant like to make a presentation regarding the proposed request?
Hi, I'm Geoff Solomonson with Galloway and Company here in Colorado. As Tina stated, that is pretty much the goal of the overview of our plan that we have there. To kind of add on to the conditions that are required there, we are finishing up the landscape plan that should be submitted for the next meeting. We are planning on coming back with another amendment. As we said, we broke the project into two different phases. One for the expansion that's proposed on the north end of the building, and then the second is for a project involving the pharmacy layout. With that, we are asking for the condition of approval that landscape will be submitted with that, which we are finishing up at this moment. The other portion I would just update is that we received approval from the Medina Borough Fire Chief on April 6th. So that is a condition that we have held from that. But outside of that, I'm here to answer any questions that the commission may have.
The public comments portion of the public hearing is now open for for conditional use permit 23-01. Is there anyone wishing to speak on this item? You have 5 minutes to provide your comments.
Could you bring back up the aerial view for me? Thank you. Oh, sorry.
No, that's all right. I was going to see if there was a mouse maybe I could do it from over there and get out of the way, but.
Oh, you're fine. Let me head first. Yeah. Actually, could you switch it?
They don't have yeah, I'm going to rotate it.
Okay, thank you. Hi, my name is Tom Lannon. I live at 1201 South Scotty Circle, Block 1, Lot 16, and I am a resident of Wasilla. Before Wal-Mart is given the green light to extend the business further, there are a few topics that deserve discussion. Originally, Wal-Mart agreed to build a berm with a fence on top that would extend the length of the property. They also agreed to stop unloading semis after 10 p.m. The purpose of these agreements was to provide safety, security, and noise abatement to residents who are going to be adversely impacted by their business. As you can see, I'm definitely in their backyard there at 1201 South Scotty Circle. To this point, Wal-Mart has never completed the berm. There is a berm, but it lacks on my end of Southview Extension at least 400 feet that does not have the berm. The fence does extend the whole length. The berm fence is built to the east of our property line, and the berm is to the west of that, if that makes sense. And the result is lack of safety, security, and noise abatement we were promised. Also, approximately 1 month after their opening, they started unloading semis any time of the day or night. I complained to the manager a couple times, and they stopped for a while, but then intermittently they will do it after 10 o'clock. Since Wal-Mart moved in without completing the berm, at least 6 times a year, usually from middle of June through October before the snow flies, it's not uncommon for people to come wandering through my backyard, and it's rather surprising, but from the parking lot or wherever. I tried to explain to them that it's not their property. A lot of times they're belligerent, and they leave. I never had to call the police, but nonetheless, I believe that they probably come around the fence, and it's easy without the berm being completed. My concern with this issue is that my wife spends most of her summers working alone outside, rock gardening in the garden, and I do not want her to have to deal with this situation. I know that it will happen. I know that it will happen. It's just not. It's just a matter of when. And there are a lot of small children in our neighborhood as well. After being a neighbor to Wal-Mart for many years, I know that I'm not going to be able to stop them from doing anything they choose to do, but I can hope that they might listen and finish the berm. I know they'd have to probably take off part of the fence, but they could finish it. On my end, I'm the most affected because of the location of what they want to do. And on the other end, on the south end, I'm sure that that berm wasn't completed there as well. At the time when they finished, I thought, but now it's more apparent. There's going to be more traffic and more concerns for the safety and noise abatement and stuff. So Wal-Mart now wants to extend their business in that same area, creating more noise and access to my property. For the safety and security and noise abatement for Southview Extension residents, I'm asking Wal-Mart to do what it can be, what they need to do to be a good neighbor, and extend the berm in the length of the property and stop unloading semis after 10 p.m. Respectfully, Tom and my wife Corliss. And I also am speaking for a number of the other residents that couldn't make it today. They asked me to point this out. At 6 o'clock, it's tough to get, if you're working in Anchorage, get out for the meeting and so on. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak on conditional use 2301 at this time? With no one else wishing to speak, the public comment portion of the public hearing is closed. Does the applicant have anything else to address?
Geoff Solomonson again with Galloway here. To address Mr. Aladdin's concerns, when I looked through the previous conditional use permits there that were approved, we kind of looked with the assumption, it was a condition of approval with the 1999 original conditional use permit that was approved on the property. I guess by reading through there, I kind of had the assumption that it was properly constructed, as it did not come up as a condition of approval in either the 2005 or 2006 amendments on there. However, we can relay those concerns to our client, Wal-Mart, and we can make those Mr. Landon's concerns to them about his feelings with the berm, and see if there's any workaround that they can do with that area. With this particular conditional permit, I mean, we are in that general area, but we are not planning on affecting any of the existing trees or the landscape that's there. And there is a truck turnaround there that I think that's the reason that maybe that was constructed and improved with that. But like I said, we can run back with those concerns to our client Wal-Mart and just at least he gave those concerns to them.
May I ask a question?
Ask a question. No, not at this point. Now I need a motion to either approve or deny conditional use permit 2301, resolution serial number 2301.
Commissioner Crafton moves to approve.
Do I have a second?
Commissioner Stafford, second.
Is there any discussion by the commission?
The only comment I had, but it sounds like Tina answered it, just to clarify the berm issue, it sounds like if this was a concern, somebody would need to basically file a code enforcement complaint at this point to essentially have it reviewed and looked at and say, hey, it doesn't look like this was as extended as far as it was maybe supposed to originally, and that would be probably the best course of action. Otherwise, this permit essentially is not banking on that berm being corrected at this time. So, my only comment.
Commissioner Seals, it took a while to go through the prints and the application. It says that this is on the northeast corner of the building, so that would probably be quite a ways from the neighborhood.
Sorry, it's northwest. Northwest.
So it's going to be basically this spot right here. This is the addition, is this area here.
Reading this, application of 3/13/2023, it says northeast corner of the existing structure.
So there's a typo, it sounds like.
Yeah.
That's the rule.
Yeah, because looking at the prints, I was confused.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if you look at page 18 in your package, that's where it shows it tying into the existing building. And if the package did say northeast, that is a typo. That sheet, let's see, let me go to that.
30.
Page 18? Oh,
No,
in
that's
the
asking.
application.
Yeah.
So the addition tucks in where the arrow is on this, that aerial there.
Well, I just saw two conflicting things and wanted to make sure we had clarification. Is there any other discussion by the commission?
Commissioner Stafford, I think with the berm issue being a code compliance thing, I do see in the 2005 legislation that there's talking of, the 99 seems to just indicate an 8-foot high fence. 2005 talks about a berm on the western edge being extended south. You can see from the contour map going north, it doesn't go to the edge of their property line on the north side. So it does sound like, but yeah, but the 2005 is page 59 of 85. Sorry, page 59 of 185. Point number 8, or paragraph number 18, where it talks about the proposed extension of the existing earthen berm south by 190 feet, reduce noise, litter, and glare onto lot 20. But I don't see any mention of it being extended any further north. So I don't know, I guess I just was kind of looking through that. I mean, I guess what I'm saying, I'm not seeing in writing where they were ever told they had to extend the berm to the north. Not that I'm not saying that's not a good idea, I'm just trying to see if they weren't doing something they should be. I guess that concludes my comments.
Mr. Chair, in answer to Commissioner Crafton, Stafford's comment, if you look on page 52 in that original 99 resolution, is number 7 on page 52 of 105.
Okay.
Where it states that they shall be required to create a seated landscape berm between the proposed structure and the Southview Extension subdivision. What I would have to do as part of that code compliance is see what that site plan showed to show that exact location of that berm. Did it extend all the way to the northern lot line, or was it just to that northern edge of the building? And I don't have that answer with me right now. But that's where it started in 99 when they constructed the new building. It stated they had to do it. Then they did an addition to the south, which was expansion to add the grocery store and maybe the liquor store space that was vacant. And that's when they had to extend it to the south. It appears, looking at the contour map, that maybe they did. Like I said, without doing a site visit. We can certainly look into it.
I missed point 7 there on page 52, so
Yeah, there
thank you
were a lot
for,
of points in there.
yeah, thank you for highlighting that.
I guess one of the, Commissioner Crafton here, one of the clarifications would be is it doesn't specify where the berm is supposed to go to, like how long it's supposed to be. Is that probably somewhere of record somewhere else, or was that one of those, again, we don't always think about things at the time, and so we didn't realize that it would be a concern down the road, specifying where it should go to? Because again, in the 2005 resolution, it specifies how long it needed to be and specified it, the lot and everything. So it's pretty clear we could see that one there. But again, on that contour map, you can definitely tell that berm, at least again from the contours, it looks like it ends pretty early, about halfway through his lot there.
Right, and I think what you've seen is maybe maturity in the staff reports and the conditions. That's why I can speak for myself. I add the actual site plans to the Reso because these are permanent record. They're on acid-free paper, they're kept forever. whereas unfortunately, some of our site plans disappear over time. I mean, especially the older ones that the borough did the reviews. We didn't even get them forwarded to us. So I like to copy them in there. Hopefully, we have that site plan that showed exactly where it was supposed to be. That's the tool that we use. Ensure that compliance.
Commissioner Seals, but at this time, this would be a code compliant issue.
Commissioner Crafton, one more question. Again, we know they're coming, the Walmart's gonna be coming back with an expansion, it sounds like, to the pharmacy on the south side of the building at that point. I mean, would that be, I mean, I guess if we could get that information by then to verify that, is that something we could look at and say, hey, this might be a condition, because either A, it sounds like maybe you didn't, the compliance wasn't met in the beginning, and before we'll approve this, we just want this brought up to code type of thing. Is that something we can look at?
Yeah, we can definitely include that in their next,
Okay.
if they come forward.
Commissioner Seals, is there any more discussion by the commission? All in favor of approving resolution serial number 2305, please say aye. Any opposed, please say nay.
Commissioner Stafford, aye.
Commissioner Sajal, aye.
Commissioner Crafton, aye.
Commissioner Seals, aye. The resolution passes.
Commissioner Bernie?
No.
So,
I need a motion to enter into the committee of the whole to discuss reviewing and updating Wasilla Municipal Code Title 16.
Commissioner Stafford, I move we enter into a committee of the whole.
Do I have a second?
Commissioner Crafton, second.
We have entered into the committee of the whole. Mrs. Crawford, do you have any comments regarding these items?
Mr. Chair, the first item, the review and updating the permit process in Title 16, is the item that the city attorney indicated that she was going to give you an update and about that potential joint meeting. The portion in your package that applies to that conversation begins on 85 and goes through 114. That's just the sections of the code that deal with administrative approvals, use permits, elevated permits, and conditions. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Wells.
Is this an appropriate time to start walking through this?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure. It's a little difficult to hear, so bear with me. If you have any questions,
Has left.
Please let me know. But I really just wanted to flag this for the Planning Commission and make sure that the Commission was aware of discussions had with the City Council regarding some changes to Title 16 that, in my opinion, are necessary and will create a permitting system, or really align the permitting system you have in a way that is more transparent and more clear to the public and also to the commission and the planner. One of the problems that I see in your code is that you have a administrative approval permit, a use permit, you have an elevated use permit and a conditional use permit, and they all use the same criteria for consideration, and some of those permits are decided by the planner and then potentially appeal to the commission, and others obviously start and end with the commission. But what we want to do is create a permitting system that actually has distinct differences between these permits, so that what I find in most communities is that there is an administrative permit or use permit that is based on static criteria. It's based on things, criteria that a applicant can identify and then comply with, and it really removes discretion. So the Planning Commission and Council, when drafting the code, at that point, that's where you identify the criteria that you want to see met for for those permits to be issued. And then it's really, the planner at that point is just kind of going through a checklist, right? Like making sure that certain criteria have been in fact met. And that is not, there's not a lot of discretion in that permitting process. When we see discretion, it will show up in a conditional use permit process. And in that case, then you still get the benefit of the knowledge and insight and recommendations of the planner, and then the discretion lies, of course, with the commission to make a decision. And what this generally does, and why it works well, is any applicant can understand, plan for, and value any purchase they're going to make or change they're going to make or use they want to take on. You know, they really know if it's an administrative permit, they know what they need to do in order to be able to do that. And the process is much more, it's much more rote and simple, and the policy decisions and considerations have been made on the front end. And with the conditional use permit, they know that that process is going to involve more discretion. It's going to be, there's going to be a greater amount of notice and public participation. And generally it's because the commission and council, when adopting their conditional use permit criteria, have really thought through what uses require that level of consideration and sort of more specific, thought process. So that is, I am eager to answer any questions you have, but that's really the overview of what we want to do, is just change that, clean it up, and make it easier for everyone to navigate. The council is hoping and is looking to schedule a joint meeting with the commission. And so what we will do is make sure that you have draft language for changes and specific questions regarding the policy surrounding certain uses for consideration at that joint meeting. Once you're able to do that with council and talk that through, and we get input from both bodies, then we'll bring an ordinance to you first for the commission's consideration.
Commissioner Seals, I think that is a very excellent idea, and at this point, looking forward to the joint meeting.
Wonderful. And if any of you have questions, I know you can relax. We're in committee as a whole, so feel free. I can also make sure if there are any comments you want to see, you're hoping to have looked at on the front end, so I can take that back and incorporate that into our first crack at it. Just let me know, or let Planner Crawford know.
Commissioner Crafton here. So is the plan of the dual meeting here to review Title 16? Is that our ultimate plan?
The plan is, and we're really not going to delve into the entire, there's so much in Title 16, and it would sort of take over all of the work that you guys are doing in a lot of ways. That's a very large scale project, but what we really want to do is really hone in on the permit process and make sure that the city of Wasilla has an administrative permit and a process for that, and that we have spent time to very deliberately identify when that permit process is in play, and it has a conditional use permit process. And, we go through the same process for identifying what is subject to that process, and then we eliminate permits that are in many ways either duplicative, or create a discretionary process, almost a mini conditional use process for a simple use permit or simple administrative permit. Because right now you use the same criteria to evaluate all permits. Some of them start with the planner making the decision. Some of them are the planner, making the decision unless the planner chooses to elevate it. And others go to the Planning Commission directly. And as a member of the public, we want to eliminate any difficulty with identifying what's going to be required of them. Does that answer your question? So it'll hone in on the permit process, which is really in 1612, 1616, 1626, short-term rentals has a component. And then there's some general provisions that apply to that in, I think, 1604 and 1608.
Yeah, I was just curious what the ultimate plan was there. So we're more looking at the permitting process, like you said, versus the individual codes themselves.
Exactly. Exactly. We're not necessarily looking to change criteria.
Correct.
We're not taking issue with the procedure on how that's applied. We're looking at when it's applied, right? Which permits require what process, and making sure those procedures and those processes are in fact different.
I guess since we're in the committee of the whole, I have some questions I had from last meeting that were outstanding. Would this be appropriate time? They were for Holly, and Holly wasn't here, so.
Just for,
Um,
I would say just make sure you finish this particular item before you move to the next, but yeah.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah. So I don't know if the chair wants to see if there's any other comments.
I was just about to ask if there were any other comments on this particular item. I think at this point, I had several questions tonight, but I think I'm going to hold those back until we have a joint session. I think it get better answers, and I may not have to ask some of the questions. Commissioner Sagel, do you have any more discussion on this?
No.
I think this item should be tabled until we have a joint session and figure it out. I guess, do you have anything to comment on short-term rentals?
I do not. I included the code section again. I know there was some conversation last time. Based on my notes, I don't follow a lot of direction to change anything, but some of that may have been based on getting some questions answered by the city attorney. So it's in your package again, starting on 115, and the conversation is commission. I'll just state again for Holly's benefit, because she wasn't there last time. There's already a plan from staff to remove the requirement for insurance, septic tank, and business license until after approval of a short-term rental. It would become a condition of approval rather than an application submittal requirement. That's pretty much basically what staff had as proposed changes. So anything else the commission wants to add to that or comment on those three changes, now would be the time.
Commissioner Seals, I was in full agreement of those changes so that there was an after instead of a before. It's a less burden on the public. Thank you. Dog kennels tonight. You have any comments on dog kennels?
Sorry. The questions I had actually related to the short-term rental code. Before we jump into that.
Okay.
Madam Attorney, so there was two questions I had that I had brought up, this Commissioner Crafton, during our last conversation with the Committee of the Whole during our short-term rental. Gosh, I don't know what page I should find it on there. Basically under 1626.050, there was some clarification and some questions around what made a person a permanent resident of the state of Alaska, and from what I understand, we utilized if their eligibility with the permanent fund. So if you qualified for it, you were eligible for it, doesn't mean you have to receive it to be able to be considered a permanent resident of the state of Alaska. But one of the discussions we were having was if it was capable to make it for like an LLC to be the owner of it. Because again, my concern around it, and just let me walk through the situation here, is you have a resident of Alaska that owns a short-term rental inside the city of Alaska, or inside the city of Wasilla. They decide to move outside the state of Alaska and lose their residency. They would then have to forfeit their permit and their right to that short-term rental in the city, which I thought was a little bit of an unfair situation for them, and was wondering if there is a way that something like that could be kind of if there's a different way to go about that.
So if this question is directed at me, I would say that absolutely, and I think that residency requirements, I mean, this is a policy question to a certain extent, right? Whenever we're dealing with residency limitations, we do need to stay within certain time periods, which is why it's tied to the PSC. But expanding the short-term rental permitting, potential permittees is something that can be done, absolutely, and that would just be a matter of preference by the commission and ultimately the council.
Okay. And again, it's not that I want a bunch of corporations that live outside the state of Alaska coming up in here and buying all our property and turning them into short-term rentals. I mean, we still want to try to avoid that. I just don't want, people to feel like they have to forfeit their permit. Otherwise, they have to, if they were to move out of Alaska. So, second question I had, and sorry, I'm trying to reference this on pages as well. I brought my notes from last time because it was easier just to bring them than it was to redo everything. Was the age requirement for a short-term rental. So this is, where's this going to fall on? Page 126 of 128, number 2 there. Individual renting. The individual renting a short-term rental must be a minimum age of 21 years of age. Does the city have the capability to impose that type of restriction on there? I think was one of the questions that got brought forth around it was, or would that fall on the business owner, or more so the short-term rental companies that do these? Is that something the city was allowed to impose?
It's an excellent question, and what I will say is there are changes that need to be made to the code section in light of changes in and interpretation of the law. So we want to make sure that we're not creating uncertainties surrounding, for example, what we allow. The city is a government entity, and I know that sounds like a condescending statement. I understand we all are very aware of that, but what that means is we have to treat substantially similar people the same. People includes corporations, and it includes individuals. And so age does matter. In Alaska, we also have a constitutional right to privacy, which means what I think of that is just doubling down on that fairness. Making sure that we're not singling people or entities out based on some difference, unless it's really narrowly tailored to our purpose, and our purpose is justified. So to the extent that the commission wants to revisit that criteria, I think that is an excellent idea.
Thank you. Sounds like I'll bring it up at the meeting. Those were all the questions I had, Chair.
Okay. Ms. Crawford, do you have anything on dog kennels this evening?
Mr. Chair, in your package on 133 is the specific approval criteria for kennels and catteries. There's, As the commission's aware, you had an item in front of you a couple months ago for a request for a kennel on a property. Some of the seated commissioners now are not currently holding this. There was a request for a kennel on 40 acres, and then prior to around 99 or something, it was prior to where there was another one that came up and was contentious. So in part of hearing the feedback from the community, hearing the concerns from the neighbors, the question that rose to the top is, should we allow them at all? Or should the code be amended to make them a prohibited use? So your district use chart has, it kind of ties in with what Holly says. The district use chart tells you what application process you have to go through. But it also has the ability for the planning commission to recommend something be prohibited and the council can adopt that. So there are some uses that are prohibited in certain zoning districts. The city attorney could jump in on this, but it's my understanding that's a policy decision if the city chooses to prohibit a use like this. I know there's some that deal with housing and other issues, that may be an issue. I'm not aware of any issue on restricting kennels and catteries within the city limits. If the commission and the council ultimately determine that they're not consistent with the objectives of the comprehensive plan and the direction that they want the city to go. If they impact the quality of life and the nuisance, then. So this was brought forward for the commission to look at, to give some direction to staff. Do you want to see an amendment to come forward? Do you want a recommendation to go forward that it's fine the way it is to the council? It's there for a talking point. So I don't have a specific recommendation one way or the other. Again, just pointing out that it's obviously a contentious item. Every application over the last 15, 20 years has been contentious. Some have been approved, some have not. Could some operate in a way that people wouldn't know? Absolutely. In fact, we had one that was after the fact. They'd been in operation for 5 years, and no one knew they were there. They came in, they got caught by code compliance, business license issue or something like that was how they came to our attention. But the neighbors didn't even know they were there. So can you operate in a way that people may not have impact? Yes. Does that appear to be the norm, at least in this particular area? And I think the concerns that you've heard expressed is no. Noise levels, without the vegetation, there's concerns about numbers. Plus, again, they tend to, they're kind of rural in nature. We have a zoning district called rural residential. You have the map in front of you tonight, just so you can kind of see where that rural residential zoning is. That's the area that would be the greatest impact there. So again, it's a policy decision. Is it time? Is there an interest in prohibiting the uses or not? So right now, they're a use permit in rural residential. They're excluded in single family R1. They're conditional use in R2 residential. They're prohibited in residential multifamily, and they're a use permit in commercial. So that's, you have that handout of that district use chart, so you can see that there too. And that's just out of the code. That's the current standards. So they're not allowed in every district anyway right now. Like I said, the requests that I've seen come through in rural residential zoning district, they're not coming into commercial, and I think that's just due to the cost of the land. So it makes sense. So it's there for you to discuss, and like I said, if you want staff to draft an amendment to take to the city council, I can do that and put it on the next agenda to strike that from the chart, or to make it an EX in all zoning districts. Or if you want to add additional criteria, as you can see on that sheet, that's your only criteria.
Yeah.
Maybe the commission feels that they could be compatible if there was some better criteria. If you don't want to propose that they be prohibited outright, so that's an option too.
Commissioner Seals, I know that the city is a city open for business, and I hate to exclude businesses from the city. we may put conditions upon them, but they could actually open up right outside the city limits and affect people in the city. So if we have some conditions set forth that mitigate noise, as you had mentioned, the one that had operated for years and nobody knew it was there, I would hate to put a restriction on business in the city. So if the proper conditions were met by the owners, I don't see why we can't be open for business.
Commissioner Stafford, do we have a definition of a kennel and cattery? Is there something, I mean,
We do. It's
it's in code then?
It is, but it's real short if you'd like me to read it real quick.
Yeah, I would be curious.
Okay, so
That
it
was my
says,
question as well.
so it says kennel means any premises used for breeding, buying, selling, keeping, or boarding 5 or more dogs over the age of 6 months, whether for profit or not. Which is why the last petition you had in front of you, part of it was for profit, part of it was not, part of it was pets, but the other part of it was commercial. So again, breeding, buying, selling, keeping, boarding 5 or more dogs. Pups under the age of 6 months don't count.
Okay, so if any resident had 6 dogs, then they would be 6 pets,
That would be the.
that would be considered a kennel.
Okay. Would that technically mean that anybody inside the city limits is required to have 5 or less animals, 4 or less technically, because 5 or more creates a kennel?
Yeah, they would have to stay, they'd have to have 4, up to 4 dogs. Otherwise, they would have to request approval for a kennel if they were in a zoning district that allowed it and they could meet that setback from the lot lines for the runs. So you could amend the definition of kennel too. You could split that particular one, personal pets, but I'm not sure that really accomplishes the purpose because the number of dogs is what increases the noise. Whether they're your pets or they're someone else's dog, they still bark.
Whether it's a residence or a business.
Right.
Yeah.
Commissioner Sado, so is there any restrictions on, I guess it doesn't sound like there's restrictions on the number of animals based on the location or the size?
Oh, you mean like if the lot was 5 acres, you could have up to
Right.
X dogs? No, there's no criteria, and that's something you could entertain too, that if
Yeah.
you were on a certain size lot, you could have. We do that with, urban chickens. The urban chicken ordinance that was adopted before all time, but that's what it is. It's based on the size of your lot. So up to a certain size, you get so many chickens, up to, as the size increases, that full proportion, you get additional chickens. So you could do something like that, a chart that prescribes it out, so then it's not needing that, maybe it just becomes an AA with those criteria in there, or you could have it come to the planning commission for review. And then you could take it on a case-by-case basis and come up with appropriate conditions.
Commissioner Crafton here. I actually really like that idea as well I mean, I would think it would be, you'd say X amount of dogs or X amount of cats. Like it can be, you can have, 5 cats and 5 dogs type of thing. Again, just being a real estate agent, seeing a lot of covenants, conditions, and restrictions for neighborhoods, that's generally what it is. But then they'll put a cap on total number of animals alongside of that. The other thing I was thinking was, based on what that definition is, it sounds like commercial is one of those ones where I could see it being a little bit more of the administrative approval in a commercial setting, because breeding, buying, selling, keeping, or boarding is a commercial business at that point. I mean, I think it should be excluded out of pretty much everything else. And then rural residential, I could very much see it being a use permit, more of a case by case, or would that still be a conditional use at that point?
Well, it's now we're into that chicken and the egg, so we're dealing with the use chart as it's written today, but after that joint meeting, it might be written differently.
Yeah, so we may want to hold off.
On some
Yeah,
of
so you
that,
just
yeah.
kind of, I would think of it as, should it be at the staff level or at the planning commission level, and don't worry about what you call it.
Yeah, yeah, okay. I mean, I would say for, if it's a commercial, it should be, my personal take would be a staff level thing. I could see a commercial business, it'd be no different than opening up any other type of business in a commercial district. I mean, commercial generally creates a lot of noise. I mean, hence we just heard Walmart and some of the concerns with Walmart and their noise. I could see it being that level, up to a certain point or something where it says, hey, you can have X amount of animals, but anything beyond that in a commercial setting, you need to have a conditional, or it needs to come up to the commission. Rural residential as well, I think that needs to be the commission straight across the board. Everywhere else, I feel like it should be excluded.
So do I understand correctly that only 2 zoning districts would be either rural residential or commercial?
Correct.
I thought that's what I heard you
I
say.
mean,
and then-
R2 is that's higher density, right? Just trying to remember definition wise.
R2 is 1 and 2 family with the option for multifamily with conditional use permit, I believe is what it
Yeah.
is.
Okay,
That's
and
what it is.
I could not see somebody putting a kennel in that area as well. I was kind of surprised to see it's a CU in that right now and it's not excluded.
Any more comments on dog kennels? Any comments on mobile food vendors? Mrs. Crawford?
You do have a handout in front of you. Mobile food vendors have been on the books since 2020. It's been online as a permit application since last year. So it's kind of still in its infancy. This is one of those first looks at it to see if there's any kind of edits, additions, updates that we need to do. What you have in your handout is the first page has the criteria, and I've got a couple strike through and underlines and some yellow highlighted area. And then the last sheet is a comparison table, just because it seems to come up as a topic of conversation. Yeah, but Palmer, but Palmer. So what you have is a comparison table of the cost, the requirements, the restrictions, so that the commission has an understanding of how it pans out. What I have in the first one, and it's one of the things that it's feedback based on mobile food vendor applicants that have come through, is I have to do a site plan for every location I go to. Do I need to do that? Palmer requires it too. And the purpose of that is for safety, for pedestrian and vehicular safety, to make sure you're not, and for fire access, to make sure you're not blocking access points that need to be there. However, based on it seems to be going fairly well, most people seem to be doing the right thing. My recommendation is that we just put the criteria in the code and then tell them that you cannot do this, you cannot block this, you must keep this open, give them that so that it just becomes that checklist type of a review. And they won't have to do each individual one. The other one change is right now, it was just part of the initial draft. We wanted to make sure that people knew what the rules were. That's what we hear a lot is, I didn't know the rules, that I couldn't do that. I didn't understand that. So when it was first drafted, we required a notarized statement. As part of their paper application, they got the full set of rules and they had to do a notarized statement. We had notaries in the office. That was easy. They were in front of us. It was paper. It was, it kind of worked out. Now that we're digital and online, someone at home wants to put in their application, doesn't have a notary sitting beside them. So the proposal is to just make it be a signed acknowledgement as part of their application. They'll still have that document with the regulations in it so they know where they can locate their cars or their food truck. The other one is, I guess I should give you page numbers. So those two I just talked about are on page 205. The site plan one is in yellow highlight. The acknowledgement is letter F below, and it's got the blue strike through and underline. I'll backtrack to page 1. The other one is, in in an abundance of caution, because when you're charting new grounds, you tend to be a little more cautious about a use. We had some issues, there's trespass issues and stuff. All of our applications require owner authorization. That's just been a standard. Well, these aren't permanent uses, these are temporary uses. So when we initially drafted it, we said you had to have the owner authorization too to prove that you're allowed to be on that site. Seems a bit much at this point. It's going to be subject to the owner. They can call the PD and have them trespassed off if they're not supposed to be there. So we'll leave that to the market to regulate that out. It doesn't seem to be much of an issue. It was more of an issue before we adopted the ordinance than it was after. So maybe it's education. They're learning that don't do this because the city's going to be watching. I'm not sure. So then flipping back to page 3, there used to be. We had a lot of constrained sites that wanted mobile food vendors on them. They didn't even have enough parking to cover their customers, and then they'd want to take away 3 or 4 spaces for their, for a mobile food vendor to go in. Again, it's been determined that we'll leave that up to the market to decide. If the owner's willing to use up all their parking spaces and their customers don't have anywhere to park, it's kind of a business decision. So we're gonna turn that back over to them, so that they can make those kind of calls. On page 4 of 5, hours of operation were put in place because some of these locations are near residential. The recommendation would be not to have the applicant tell us what the hours of operation, but to just identify, does the city have a concern and a recommendation for limiting any hours of operation? Do we even care if they operate 24/7? If we do, just put it in the code and say that food vendors may be operated between these hours. Period. And it'll be in a copy of. So that's why that one is highlighted. Number 5 on that same page is just clarifying that, it says what you have to do when you renew. We're still working through that process. We just got some feedback from our vendor that does the online permitting, so that next year will be set up for automatic renewals, so they don't have to resubmit everything. It'll automatically do it. The only thing they'll have to resubmit is if anything's changed since the time they originally applied. Maybe it's a bigger food truck than it was, they operate differently, something. And then, their insurance expires, and so do their business licenses and their DEC certifications. So they need to get us those current ones as part of that renewal. So that's just clarifying that. And then the last one is letter B under number 5. Again, if they want to transfer their permit, it should be fine. We can put a notation that they can advise us. I think the biggest reason it was in there is because you transfer the mobile food vendor, permit transfers, but do they tell that person they also need to get a business license? So it was kind of like, that was a trigger to say, okay, yes, you're transferring it. Don't forget to now tell the new owner it has to get a business license. Because a business license, I don't think transfers over. You're going to have to apply for your own. So it was kind of in there for that consistency. It could go away. I mean, it's more kind of advisory, but it could go away. So those were the changes that, just like I said, from using it over the past few years, the staff's proposing that we make those changes. Again, give me feedback if you agree with them, don't agree with them, or if you think there should be more changes. Like I said, this is just that. It's been a few years. Let's look at it and evaluate it. See if we want to do something different.
Commissioner Seals, I have a question. Are we consistent across the Palmer, Wasilla Borough area?
No, because none of them are consistent. There's not consistency about it.
It was a great question.
It's close. I mean, we are close to Palmer. We're closest to Palmer than we are to Soldotna or Kenai or some other areas. I know that when I did this research in 2020, so I'm stretching, I think there's a few communities that don't even regulate it at all. They just, organically, whatever happens, happens. It's all fine. And maybe they're more of a tourist type destination. From a planning standpoint, I chose to, again, looking for pedestrian safety, vehicular safety. The other concern that I have heard as a planner, and another reason why we wanted to see the locations, is a lot of businesses have heartburn, restaurants especially, when a vendor shows up in front of them. maybe they're on the adjoining lot, whatever. So some of these were addressing concerns from business owners that, they would do it. I think Palmer takes it a little further. They require you to be so far away from a restaurant if you're doing a food vendor truck. Ours doesn't have that particular requirement. Could add that, but it's not in there. But like I said, it kind of runs the gamut of, you don't have to do anything but a business license to, I think Palmer and Wasilla are, like I said, they're the closest and probably have the most detailed information in them.
I was just wondering about making sure that we're not restricting business.
And it looks like a lot of words, and it is a lot of words, but when they're submitting it, it's upload your pictures, upload your licenses, fill in your name, address, whatever, transmit your fee online, and you get your approval. So, again, as long as they have those clear directions, they only need to read it once just to make sure that where they set up complies. And the commission at the time, like I said, came up with a lot, they recognize things too. We had one particular vendor at the time that had a hot grill. I mean, it's like a charcoal grill or a wood burning grill. And that's why you have that setback. And you have fire hydrants, because some people don't think it's a problem to block a fire hydrant off. It is. So some of these, you shouldn't have to put in there, but.
Some of that is code compliance as well.
It is, but if it's not in the code, the officer can't
Fire
compliance.
fire hydrant?
The fire marshal would have to go up and do that.
All right.
I mean, like I said, so certainly this is not ready for adoption. I'm going to go ahead and put it on the next agenda under committee of the whole, so you guys will have time to look at it, digest it a little, see if you think there's some more adjustments that can be made. And then hopefully we'll be able to wrap that up. You give me some direction at the next meeting, and then I can bring you back a resolution.
Thank you, that sounds great.
Commissioner Stafford, just to clarify, the mobile food vendors, they pay sales tax on their sales, correct?
That is correct.
Because as I'm thinking about where some of these set up, I realize now that they're setting up there because they're all just outside city limits. So I do think we want to be careful that we incentivize them as much as possible to set up, because it benefits us through the sales tax. So I think if we make it too burdensome, they'll just do what apparently they're already doing, and they just set up exactly outside city limits. So I would like to see it enough to protect the safety of the public and not infringe on other businesses, but certainly entice them to come inside the lines.
Right. And one way we do try and entice them is, I know the Menard is always trying to pull them in as part of their activities. The museum does it too as part of their events. One of the things, once the couplet's adopted, it lends itself to doing more activities. There will be, 8-foot sidewalks. You could potentially, and the sky's the limit, you could amend it to allow whatever, but we also have some city parking lots. So one of the things that staff has talked about but hasn't taken official action is when that firehouse parking lot was, the intention was to be able to, at times, set that up as a mobile food vendor hub. And I think Palmer's sort of doing that.
Palmer does.
Where they have
yeah.
a couple food trucks in one little location. So that was one that has always been on my eye, to draw people downtown and to bring people into the area. And again, a lot of your restaurateurs start, a lot of them start out in a mobile food vendor, and then they springboard into a permanent location. So it gives them that option.
Thank you.
City Administrator?
Chair, I just want to speak kind of on behalf of what we're hearing in the public. So these were regulations written in 2000 for COVID. And COVID really launched a lot of these mobile food trucks to be something people look forward to when they go to parks or they go to a show. That's one of the things that draws them. And one of the things that makes us very unique is you go to planning if you have private property, you go to public works if you are going to a city park. So that is very unique from most cities. So we really need to figure out a way to streamline and understand the numbers. Are we attracting? Are we distracting this kind of commerce coming to the city, and finding that balance? So just from the market standpoint, that's what we're hearing. You know, why do I go to planning, then I go to public works? And then understand the market has shifted, and this is really a pretty robust market now that might have not been in 2020.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of stores will put stores right next to each other. Bars will be right next to each other. And if a restaurant has a couple of food trucks next to it, the people are gonna circle around and go where they want. So a streamlined process is what I would like to see. So it'd be easy for one click and you're in business.
And Mr. Chair, I'm glad Crystal mentioned that about the parks. That's one thing that I didn't call out specific, but just be aware that the way the city code is written, not Title 16, but the city code is written, there is a requirement if you want to be a vendor of any kind in a city park, you must apply for a permit through Public Works. And they have different safeguards and requirements. And I'm going to make an assumption that they're based on the number of children that are in your city parks. They require background checks. They require a permit, for each park. So there's a fee if you're here, there's a fee if you're there. There's a process for determining whether you can even be there because they can only have so many vendors, especially like Wasilla Lake. There's a high demand for Wasilla Lakes, great visibility, but it's also on a sunny day, it's full of people on the beach that all have cars that they came in too. So you can't fill up the parking lot with a bunch of vendors if there's nowhere now for the residents and the recreators to go. So Public Works has historically been in charge of that. That doesn't mean that you cannot include as part of your recommendation that, maybe they be streamlined or that section of the code be looked at. It just doesn't fall under Title 16 in your purview, but it doesn't mean you couldn't recommend that the City Council doesn't look at it.
At the next meeting, could you provide us a copy of the Public Works permit process so that we can look at it and determine if we need to make any changes in that?
Or comments at least.
Or comments.
Go on.
City Administrator first.
Still going.
Just one more thing. I know I'm guilty of this. When you say mobile vendor, it's not always food. It's rugs and puppies and other things. So you may consider a food vendor to be handled a little differently than other commodities. But just remember, it's not always food.
Actually, looking at that, ours is food only is what it looks like here. We actually only allow mobile food vendors, not mobile vendors, from what I understand, looking at this. That
was my assumption
Yeah.
as well.
Public Works will tell you that they get all kinds of requests in.
Gotcha.
And if you're ever down at Wasilla Lake, I've seen puppies and I've seen rugs. I've seen all kinds of good stuff down there.
And I think that's a code compliance concern at that point, right?
A couple of local growers set up in that very parking lot at Wasilla Lake. Too.
Oh, eat vegetables.
Yeah.
Well, that's food at that point, right?
I'm sorry, I have grow facilities on my.
Boy, I wasn't going there.
I had a moment. I was like, "Wait, I know." Okay, now.
Okay, I know that's the same thing. Sorry
It's
about
okay.
that.
Commissioner Crafton here. 2 comments. So one, I would really like to see that maybe if we could start looking at streamlining that process to get vendors into parks. I almost wonder if it should be capped at a certain amount of vendors in the parks too, because again, it's on nice, beautiful days when you want the food vendors, all of them are going to show up in our parks potentially, and then now there's no parking for actual people to come and visit the parks. And so I wonder if we could look at just maybe saying, hey, it's a first come, first served basis, X amount of people can be in this parking lot or size of parking lot. I'm thinking if I did a park area, the one closest to, I think it's Weber, like you probably could only get like 1 in there, maybe 2 before it starts getting pretty tight in that parking lot. Or maybe the main one in between the basketball courts there, you probably could get 2 in there as well before you start eating up too much parking as well. So I would like to see that potentially streamlined, because that's something I think would be a great value to the city, is during events and nice summer days where you have more food vendors that are closer to the parks, which, I mean, somebody with little kids, once you pack up those kids and you go somewhere, you really don't want to have to go back to where you were. You'd like to be able to stay where you're at, get food, and go back to what you're doing in those parks. So I'd like to see that. Second comment was the hours of operation. If I'm correct, we don't have any type of noise ordinance for timeline period right now.
No, we do not.
That might be just, instead of imposing it specifically on mobile vendors like this, mobile food vendors, it was one that's just initiated as a whole in the city, where it says, 10 o'clock is usually that time when you think about it, like, hey, there's a noise ordinance that's in place at 10 o'clock, and that allows the vendors to also understand, like, hey, and then maybe we need it in two places, but I know, like, for the short-term rentals, it's been a concern as well, where people after 10 o'clock at night, you can't call the police and say, hey, these people are being too loud, because again, there's no ordinance in place for that. And again, time can change. 10 o'clock usually seems to be 9 or 10 o'clock usually seems a pretty common theme across most cities. I want to say it's usually like 10 to 7, I think, and then like 8 a.m. on weekends. I want to say it's slightly adjusted a lot of times. So I think maybe that's something we need to look at is an overall city noise ordinance versus just one specific to the food vendors.
I have a question for the city administrator. Our music in the park, what would be the time frame on that?
So that's a good question, because we have a contractor that, when they apply for their permit, but I think it's 10 p.m., except for like New Year's Eve and 4th of July, obviously is later. But even this year for 4th of July, we're not having fireworks. It's got moved to New Year's. So 10 o'clock is usually the hour of quitting. And I don't know how you would, I don't know how you would regulate noise. That's always a tough one, but maybe there's other cities that can do that.
A lot of cities do. I think it's a decibel limit thing. Those were my only comments about this.
Any additional comment from commission?
I had kind of going off Commissioner Crafton's thoughts, Commissioner Stafford, thoughts, and this is outside of our scope, but since we have a city council member here. Well, we got two, yes. Mr. Brown, didn't see you back there, sir. I wonder if even at our Wasilla Lake Park, Iditta Park, maybe even Nunley Park here, instead of using up parking lot spaces, could there be a concrete pad poured that would fit 2 or 3 vendors, and then that way the food trucks wouldn't take up parking? They would have a designated non-parking lot spot that they could set up at. Would that solve the issue of parking spots getting eaten up? For those parks, those popular parks that get a lot of traffic in the summer. Just a thought.
Commissioner Crafton, I thought about that too at one point, was if we just, I know the Menard Center has more or less a designated food vendor location, but again, not everybody thinks like, hey, I don't want my restaurants that are in the city today, I'm gonna go find one of our mobile food vendors, I should go to Menard. What if we had a designated area more or less in the city that was like, this is the mobile food vendor park, where if you, again, didn't want to go to our general restaurants, you could say, hey, let's go see who's there today. And it's just one of the, it's a first come, first served basis. There's a limited number of spots, and whoever shows up there that day decides that way they always know they have a dedicated place. It'd probably go along the lines of because it's a public area at that point. Again, the concern might be people taking it up, parking or things going on there. But again, it'd be one of those, like, probably behind a lock and gate. But I think it'd be a good idea for the parks as well. We probably have some room to add a concrete area for that, or at least a gravel padded area, something. Good idea.
Probably depends on how much the city wants to spend on that versus the 2.5% sales tax that they're gonna get from the mobile food vendor. You'd have to do some serious pencil work on that one. Any other comments or?
And for the commission, what I will do is I've tried to capture all your notes, but as far as a noise ordinance, again, that's in the city code of ordinances. So I can research how you would form that recommendation to the council. Improvements to the parks, typically, I mean, based on code, they come out of the Parks and Recs Commission. But that doesn't mean that, I mean, I can also look into, I can talk to the city clerk and maybe the city attorney offline and see, is there any reason why you couldn't submit a recommendation to them, you know, formalize it some way, you know, informational memorandum or something, or a resolution, you know, something like that, supporting that they look into that. When you have your capital improvements project discussion at the end, you know, toward the end of the year, that's when you want to keep all these things in your mind about improvements too. You know, things like that that would require money. To forward those recommendations so the council would have them in their list and then they can prioritize them.
Commissioner Crafton here, I mean, we are planning, so it's future planning of the city. I would think we could at least, again, if it's not our exact capability to put forward, we could at least come together and provide some pretty heavy recommendation as to what we're feeling. I was gonna say, Commissioner Seals, I mean, the dollar amount of doing it versus also like the happiness of the city is sometimes hard to quantify. So I mean, if it makes our residents happy, sometimes it does cost us a little bit of money to get something done, so.
No, understood.
And this is Holly. I can weigh in on this a little bit now. I think you're correct. I think that because of the nature of your duties on the planning commission, you can weigh in. I think that's appropriate. I think also it's also framing the considerations. I mean, for every permit that's issued when there's a business license associated with it, there's the question of what you regulate or what the city chooses to regulate in its licensing procedures. That's sort of done as a stopgap on the front end, and then it bleeds into use, and you see that with the vendor permits, you know, and so there's decisions made on how many permits and where and how they're issued and what they're issued for, and that obviously impacts the use once they're in play, and so I think that is a pretty direct tie. I think you're okay.
Thank you. I need a motion to exit committee of the whole.
Commissioner Crafton moves to exit committee of the whole.
Commissioner Sadell, second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Move to unfinished business. Ms. Crawford, would you please introduce item number 1 and provide your staff report?
Before we get into that, do you mind if we take a 5-minute recess?
We can do a 5-minute recess.
Yep. Good with that.
Throat was getting dry.
There's cough drops in there.
This will do. This will get the saliva moving. Just the mint ones. You got the good ones. Yeah, I'm good. I like them better. Oh.
If you want you guys and you want city council to know where the problem area is.
Like, I have absolutely no. Working on, have enough public comment, of course, we go.
State that we return.
Commissioner Seals, we're returning from our break. We're in unfinished business. Ms. Crawford, would you please introduce item 1 and provide your staff report, please?
Certainly. For the record, Tina Crawford, City Planner. This item is public hearing number 1 under unfinished business. It's resolution serial number 23-04. This item was continued from the March 14, 2023 Planning Commission meeting. It's a resolution recommending that the Wasilla City Council amend Wasilla Municipal Code Section 16.04.070 definitions to change the title for the definition of day to day / or comma business. Amend Chapter 16.12 permit approval by city planner to revise the permit review times. Amend Chapter 16.16 planning commission approvals to update the procedures for submittals requiring planning commission approval, and other minor revisions and clarification necessary for consistency between the two chapters. So what you have in your package today, starting on 141, you got a table of contents. You have the draft resolution and strike through and underline. Then the next item is basically what I call a clean version of the code, that if you went with the assumption that the code was adopted as shown in the strike through and underline, that's how it would read. The next item in the package on page 175 is just a comparison of those permit application processes for an AA permit, a use permit, an elevated AA or use permit, and a conditional use permit. And then on page 177 and 178, the 177 is an amended version of what you had in your package last time. So what it does on the left-hand side is show you the current activities that are required in the code for each of the uses, the AA, the use permit, the elevated permits, and the conditional use permits. In the middle section are the current review times that are established in the code, if any. And then the last column is the proposed review times. The changes, so, and then on the back side of that, on 178, what I did is basically try and get you a better tool to hone in on the changes between the review times. Because the process, pretty much, I don't recall the conversation last time about the process, about public notices or any of that. That is what it is. The code just had, it was missing some language, it was organized badly, it was easy to miss items and requirements, so that's just cleanup for that. But the meat of this resolution in front of you is shown on page 178. And what I took was those current and proposed review times and grouped them by the permit type itself. So you could have that direct side-by-side comparison of what the code today requires and what it would require. The change that happened is the table you saw last time had longer review times for the re-review, longer completeness reviews. So there was some feedback and comment from that. So I incorporated that in here, because the commission still may not agree that those are appropriate, but at least they have been incorporated into your resolution that you have. And I'll just briefly go through it. The crux of it is, instead of 1 day for completeness review, and this is for anything from a commercial tenant to in the conditional use of Wal-Mart, whatever. Instead of 1 business day, it's 3 business days. Originally, we had proposed 5. We took it down and basically went with the middle of the road and came up with 3. The initial review, which is that detailed review that's done by Public Works and by planning, that takes all the time, the bulk of the time to review to make sure it complies with every component of Title 16 in the code, setbacks, landscaping, height, building elevations. That's a detailed review. We kept that at 10 business days, that initial review. But then once they submit their subsequent permit for review, then it goes down to 5 business days to give us time to look, because that should be a quicker review than that initial, because they should only be addressing a few things. Now, obviously, you know, it's hard, the code says up to, and there was a lot of discussion about up to, maximum of, more than. They all mean the same thing. The intent, the direction from administration is to do these as fast as possible. That is current administration's goal. Again, open for business. We want to encourage it. We know there's a short season. But sometimes, you right now have 2 departments that are involved in these reviews, and they're doing different things. This isn't the only project that they have on their desk. So they have to be able to have time to fit in their schedule. They may have to research something. They may call something out as item. It may take 2 or 3 days to go find that, for their staff to research the information and provide them that feedback. They need that time and analysis. So that's why it's changing. The rest of the stuff, really, you'll see if you go to the very bottom, the notification of the decision, it was frustrating to me that the code didn't recognize that as being important to an applicant or a developer. When there's or even the resident, when there's only a 15-day appeal period, you need to get that letter out quick. They need to have those full days to be able to submit an appeal if they feel that that's necessary, whether it's an appeal of the city planner's decision for administrative approval or the planning commission's decision. So that's put into code so that it's clear that, we want to preserve the public's right or the applicant's right to have as much time as possible to prepare that appeal if it's necessary. So that's in there. Same with, decisions, cleaning that up. There was some odd things about comment periods, and it was more about elevation. There was a lot of bad thing in elevation, so I basically just struck all the procedures for elevation and said it'll follow the same process as a conditional use. And that's what a rezone does, that's what a variance does. Rather than try and fix that section, I just referred it to the other section. Now, as Holly Wells pointed out tonight, your use permit column and your elevated column are the ones that are under discussion. That was your committee of the whole discussion, number 1. So you may see those columns go away, but because they're not gone yet, I went ahead and cleaned them up, organized them the same, carried the time frames over, and then when it comes time, if the decision is those go away, then they will be stricken at that. So we still need to address them at this point, knowing that there may be some future changes. So I think I've captured it in a nutshell. I'd be happy to answer any questions. It's just really important. It's being respectful of staff's times. It's being respectful of the developer's time. I know there was some concern, and I'm always very cautious about saying other communities do this or that because we're Wasilla, and we determine what's appropriate for us. But it doesn't mean you can't review it and consider how other people do it, and does it work, does it not work, and adopt the good things. So the purpose of this, again, is to set those clear expectations to any applicant, and any resident. Know what the process is, what the timelines are, whether they get a notice, whether they don't get a notice. It'll be as transparent as possible, be organized, but it'll allow that adequate time, because the one thing that you find with review agencies and you hear complaints from developers is, we don't do it here, but I'm going to give it to you as an example. Initial review's done. Staff gives you all these comments about, you don't have this on the plan, you need to, this is the wrong calculation, whatever. Then they submit those revisions. Then the staff comes up with a new list of comments. That's not okay either. You get one and done. You need to hit everything that they need to address that's not consistent on that site plan the first time. Then subsequent reviews are just supposed to be looking at those deficiencies and making sure that they've been addressed. So this is, again, protecting that developer, that they know that that staff has the time to do that thorough review, so we're not going, oh my gosh, I did that so fast, I only had 2 days to do it, or 3 days, or 5, and projects got in the way. This makes sure that staff has the time if they need it. If it's complex, they have it. If it's not complex, then they can bust it out super fast. So again, that's it in a nutshell. I think it's still reasonable. I will tell you that most people that I talk to, when they say, well, how long does it normally take to get an approval, even for a single family home? And I say, usually a couple days if you've got everything that you submitted in there. What? That's it? That's awesome. Really? I'm used to like 30 days or 2 weeks or something like that. Even for large scale developments, they're used to it being 30 days to 6 months before they even get that first set of comments. So we are about the fastest review process, even with these changes, that I've seen anywhere. So we, this department has prided itself, and the administration has kept that focus of getting these things through as fast as possible, but we also need to make sure we're accurate and that we are enforcing the codes as they're written and making sure that developments are in compliance. And so that's what this is hoping to accomplish. So I'll be happy to answer any questions, or if you want to go through it in more detail, I'll be happy to do that too.
Public comments portion of the public hearing is now open for resolution serial number 2304. Is there anyone wishing to speak on this item? You have 5 minutes. Any comments? No one wishing to speak. The public comment portion of the public hearing is closed. Does the staff have anything else to address? Now I need a motion to either approve or deny resolution serial number 2304.
Commissioner Stafford, I move we approve resolution serial number 2304.
Do I have a second?
Commissioner Sadell, second.
Is there any discussion by the commission?
Thank you for preparing. I will say again, this lovely green sheet here. You talking about it, I'm like, I'm not even going to look at the notes here. This is what's the easiest way to make sense of this. I mean, essentially, it's just a longer version in the notes here. I brought the other one because again, when I looked at this, I was like, wait a second, this looks a little different than what we saw last time. And so, from what I'm understanding, and again, it's nice because some of the comments I had made last time about it essentially have been brought into this. You're asking, saying, hey, when you submit your permit, submit everything, we want to first make sure we have all of your ducks, basically. Once we know you have everything, that's when we're going to start this initial review, which is the 10-day period. And then, it looks like we need X, Y, and Z as well. And then that's the subsequent review period now that comes down to the 5-day period. That's basically how that would fall there. I think that is a more streamlined process. It makes sense. It's saying it keeps your clock from ticking when it comes to somebody submitted something, so now we have X amount of time before we have to get everything back. It takes another step back where you could submit everything and we go, you still don't have everything, and you could kind of keep asking for that stuff before that completeness process essentially is completed there. Looking at the log that we have for what our permits coming in, I still felt like the 10 days was a little long. I mean, I personally felt like we could knock it down to 5 days and then 3 days for the subsequent review. Part of why I feel like that's still reasonable is the city also still has a 5-day request that they can put forward to extend. Is it that 5 days? Is it just the initial review, or would it be basically any time frame that you could ask for could be submitted for an additional? And I believe that falls under the AA, the administrative approval.
The additional time for good cause is for the decision.
For the decision itself.
Yes. At least what it's calling out to me. So if you look on page 178 under use permit, at the bottom next to the last, that decision line, it said that there was a conflict. And then the proposed, it still has the extend for good cause. I'm not sure, I'm just looking real quick, so I'm not gonna.
Sorry, I had it before earlier. Let me see what page I can try to find it on. It was 125. Nope, that's too far back. Where'd it go? It was line 125 maybe. For good cause, to issuance of the decision of the permit not to exceed. And so what would that extension include? Issuance of the decision, wouldn't that be essentially for additional review time?
No.
No.
No, your review's over at that point.
Yeah.
So it's currently where that, and you'll probably see that language disappear. That's just gonna be a guess on my part as part of that use permit, elevated permit conversation. Because the way that that's used, again, is the use permit. So when you submit a use permit application, staff reviews it for completeness, then we have to prepare a public notice to go out to the public. We're doing our review at the same time, so they're running concurrently so that it doesn't get delayed instead of doing the review first and then the notice. What that additional 5 days is, if you received a bunch of comments at the end, after you've already reviewed it as the city planner or the public works department or something, and somebody raises something in a comment that you didn't realize, you may go, oh, wait, that didn't come up during discussion or during review. I need to do some more research. So for good cause. Oh, wait, it appears that I didn't look at everything, or there's something else that needs to be looked at. Maybe water availability is an issue, or, there could be some unforeseen things. It's so that you have that time to look at it and analyze it to see if it needs to be elevated to the planning commission. That's typically the only way that's ever been used. And in fact, during the 12 years I've been here, I've never used the additional 5 days. So I anticipate that will be stricken because again, it will be those amendments to the use permit going away.
Okay. One other question was, what do you generally find is the average time it takes a permit to be reviewed and completed and a decision issued? I mean, again, I get your time frames are generally pretty short, so you're obviously working in those time frames. I mean, are you going to still feel like most of those time frames are going to be pretty accurate? It's just the additional time is more so for the need of, again, for instance, the Wal-Mart one's probably not as simple. It's a bigger project when we see, but we also don't see those every day. We're not getting those very frequently. Large scale developments like that. What would you say your average time is, or usually does it take to get these done?
It depends. And I wish I could give you an answer. Yeah. I'm not being coy about it. For a commercial permit or a single family, it's usually straightforward. Either you got it, you don't, you're approved, you're not. I mean, it usually takes, maybe same day. We often get our single family and duplex out the same day, next day. That's just what we do because there's not that level of detail in it. But rather than, you would have to map out every single permit type and does it need a landscape plan? If so, then that's a longer review. If it needs, are there elevation changes? Are you looking at grading and drainage more? Some sites are flat, some sites have a lot of topography. So it varies from site to site, from use to use. Again, these are maximums, these are not minimums. These are just to establish that if you need it, you have that time available. Because again, I will tell you as the city planner for the city, the majority of my time is not working on these. A lot of my time is not spent on that. A lot of it's code writing, it's dealing with customer service, answering questions, working on special projects that may come from administration, things like that. Pre-application meetings, all of that kind of stuff. There are a million avenues available to every applicant to come in with something that can be approved quickly. The pre-app's free. They can come through that, show us all their drawings. We can give them all the comments ahead of time before they ever submit their permit, and they can expedite it. But it varies from permit type to permit type, and again from size, because some size requires more. If you're reviewing a landscape plan on something that's under 5,000, it's done by an individual. That's a lot of work to see. Did they really show all the plantings? Do they have the calculate? It takes more time to do that. And I'm just speaking from my standpoint. I can't not speak directly to what Public Works, the time that's involved with them. It's just kind of, it varies. So short of creating a review time based on what the permit type is and then mapping those out, I think this is the simplest and clearest ways. Again, you can project your timeline for your project based on this, because if you take advantage of a pre-app, you get all your comments addressed ahead of time, you're not going to do a subsequent review because you already know what the comments are and you've already addressed them before you submit it, so you've already cut off the second review. So a smart developer with a smart team is going to take advantage of that. Someone who doesn't, I've had some, I can tell you there was one business that took me 6 months of back and forth for comments. 6 months. And it wasn't because they didn't know what they were doing. It just wasn't because they didn't have clear direction. They had it in writing. They had it in a list. Some business owners and developers have a different work ethic and business model, and others don't. Some are okay with it taking time. But there's a lot of things that are factored in here where they can get it done expedited, and get it faster. But it's going to be up to them to make sure that their plans are coming in. But like I said, it's not just my department that reviews them, it's Public Works that reviews them. Sometimes we have to reach out to other agencies. We may have to talk to the borough about a flood zone, or maybe There could be wetlands on the property, there could be something. Other agencies don't jump. Most agencies want 30 to 45 days, federal and state agencies, when they review a permit, even for something like a dock. This is really expedited. So I'm giving you my professional opinion as the planner who's been doing this job for 12 years to tell you this creates the best scenario to make sure that staff has the time to do that thorough and accurate review. But it's certainly your discretion to, if you want to shorten it up, obviously that's an option too. So I don't mean that to be attacking or anything, but this was thought out for years before it was put in front of you. It was risen, as an active conversation a few months ago. And that has, some of that factored in has to do with, well, what do you do when you don't have a city planner in the office? So that factors in some, but that's not the main thing. Again, our city has grown, our codes have grown, our reviews have grown, and some are 1 day, some of them are 10 days. Some of them, I'm pushing 10 days to get them out. But it's not because if you gave me dedicated time, uninterrupted, to sit at a desk, that I could work on it, but that's not the way the day works. The phone rings, a customer walks in, an email comes across your desk, you've got meetings you got to attend to. So you've got to factor that in. It's not 10 days of dedicated time that staff's working on these. Like I said, so it's just giving adequate time to make sure that they're done right. And it protects the quality of life for the city. It protects the investment that these developers are making to make sure that we're doing. If these rules are adopted, they need to be enforced.
Two other questions alongside that. Is there a way that we maybe add some type of size of project to allow for more time? Is that something that might be able to be considered? I mean,
Anything's an option.
Yeah, well, yeah, obviously.
I mean, anything's an option. Again, I'm going from the standpoint of trying to keep it simple. So again, regardless of what kind of developer you are, if you're an AA permit, here's my timelines. Here's what it could potentially be. I can factor in 2 re-reviews, and I know that I think that still factors into probably less than 30 days. That's a pretty fast turnaround for anything from big to small. But you can. That's what I said. It's just deciding what you want to do. I chose to go the simple route, the direct route. Again, recognizing those concerns, subsequent reviews, that was a valid point. Do they take as long? No, they don't. So I took that input and took it down to 5 instead of 10. Will that be a pinch point sometimes? Yes. And may it require, somebody to have to, do something extra or put something off to get that done? Yes. Is it every day? No. I'm not going to tell you every permit. Is it even the majority of the permits? Probably not. Which again, the procedure in our office has always been to get them out as fast as possible, as soon as possible. Maximums, not minimums.
The city is wanting to streamline. This gives potential permit holders a really simple guideline. And at this point, we have a motion on the table to approve.
I had one other comment I wanted to ask as well, since we are discussing. Would it be beneficial, I mean, again, we can't do this, we'll bump our two council members left. I mean, again, as the city's growing, is it something we need to start looking at is adding to our planning department and have somebody that their more or less dedicated job is to look at a lot of these completeness sections for you, where it's, as people submit things, instead of it being your job to review it, there's somebody else that's going to be reviewing that, and you're reviewing the final things. Again, that might be where the city's starting to come at here, is it's like, hey, maybe our planning department's grown enough, which is obviously what we want, that it's time to warranting an additional administration at that point. That might be what we're looking at here, would be maybe a little bit more streamlined way to solve a problem here. So.
It has been a topic of discussion. Staffing's always a topic of discussion. Budgetary, it comes up during that. That's certainly one of the benefits from a staffing standpoint of the online permitting, is it's easy to track. We track our hours that it takes to review things. We're still working out as to how do you actually track that, what do you incorporate, we don't want to turn into an attorney with billing every minute that you talk with someone on the phone kind of thing, because then that creates more work to go in and track your hours. So trying to work out that reasonable balance, but the benefit from that system and the reporting that it grants is now we will be able to track that. Is there a need for an additional planner? I don't think it still minimizes the time that they need to dedicate to it, because that planner would also still be answering questions for customers walking in, doing pre-applications and stuff like that. So, but yes, that it has come up in conversations about what are you over the next 5 years during the strategic planning session that was held with the city council. Staff, every department had indicated where they think they're going to have growth needs and things like that. So it's certainly being looked at too.
This is Holly. When it's appropriate, I do have a few comments that might prove helpful.
Go ahead.
One thing I would say is that to the extent the council looks at budgeting additional resources later, we still want to make sure that our code is something that we can comply with. Otherwise, we create a situation where we're not complying with our code because the timelines are unrealistic, and as a result, we're actually violating our own code, and that creates, from the attorney's perspective, risk to the city. But the most important risk that's created is the potential for inconsistency in permit approvals or denials. Because if something's moving too quickly and you have an obligation to get to the finish point before you have an opportunity to apply your analysis, that leaves a lot of room for error. And in other communities, I have seen that go very wrong. So I think that to the extent this is the time period that makes sense now, those are the two pieces from a legal perspective that really support providing timeframes that the department finds reasonable with the staff they have on hand. But the other thing I will say is the planner Crawford's right. We are going to eliminate a lot of the language here, in part because we're going to take into account what is needed and the level of analysis at the permit level. And then that will make it easier. So when the next time the commission asks a question like, how long does it take to get through a permit for X, the goal is to be able to give a much more definitive period for those administrative permits. Because a lot of the discretionary, more difficult permits are a conditional use permit process.
Thank you. Commissioner Seals, I have a motion on the table to approve resolution serial number 2304. Please say aye. Opposed, please say nay.
Commissioner Sadil, aye.
Commissioner Kraft and I.
Commissioner Stafford, aye.
Commissioner Seals, aye. The motion has passed. Communications. The following items under communications. Permitted information. Log and enforcement log. This gets to sit in the Borough Planning Commission agenda.
Mr. Chair, if I could just go back to the code enforcement law, because I know that Councilmember Graham had mentioned
Yes.
about that. This commission can ask for whatever information that they want. Okay, so I want to make that perfectly clear. If you want to see the entire detailed code compliance log, you can ask for that. What the code and/or the rules or procedures for the planning commission state is that a report is to be provided by the code enforcement officer for land use violations. So this is a cold down, but if you believe that would be beneficial for you, for understanding the state of how the city's operating, your decisions for conditional uses, that kind of stuff, we can certainly provide you in an entire report. That is why it was narrowed down. Again, that doesn't mean that we can't give you the entire report, so you just need to give me some direction as to, you know, if you'd like that, you can think about it, let me know next time, or whatever, but it's an option to give you that fully vetted out report. This is just, again, following the minimum of what the code says, but we can certainly enhance it for you.
Thank you. I think that's something we could possibly discuss at our next meeting. Audience comments. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to provide any comments? Please write your name and contact information on the sign-up sheet. You have 3 minutes to make your comments.
Hello, I'm Barbara Mack, and my husband and I live in the city limits. We just want to say that we are against dog kennels in the city limits and in our area that we live in. We have 5-acre or bigger lots, and all the people that are in our area are not wanting a dog kennel in the area, and it is in the city limits, so we just want to voice our opinion about that. That we feel like the noise from the dogs and the people coming back and forth to do all the business with the dog kennel, we just don't want that in our neighborhood or in our city. So we just wanted to say it.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Staff comments.
Comments? I do not have any comments, thank you.
City Attorney, do you have any comments?
No comments, thank you.
Commission comments. Any commissioners have any comments?
Commissioner Crafton, just thanks today. I feel like it was a pretty productive meeting, especially with our committee as a whole. Do we know when we're looking to get our joint meeting up together with the city council yet? Do we have a?
I think she had mentioned something earlier
Yeah.
about it hadn't even been scheduled yet.
Yeah, no, I wasn't sure if we were looking at a timeline like, hey, we're looking 3-4 months out, or we're hoping to get this ready in the next 30 days or so. Do you?
I think it's sooner than I think it's sooner rather than later. With the city clerk is out of the office at a clerk's conference, so I think that you should expect upon her return. I think they're gonna get that meeting scheduled with both the council and commission. So I don't hold me to this. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure you're looking at a meeting in the next month.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Sajal?
No comments.
No comments.
Commissioner Stafford. This is Commissioner Seals. I have one question. The Landscape Committee, their final meeting,
Their final meeting is April 17th.
April 17th.
So you will have it, assuming that they do finalize and don't choose one more meeting, because they technically have till June, but their goal is to get it done. We're going to put it on the committee of the whole for the meeting in May, so that you would at least have a chance to look it over, do some initial conversation, And I know the committee has offered for at least one of them to come to the meeting to kind of answer questions, if you had specific questions about where were they coming from, why did they feel that was appropriate. So you can give me that direction at that next meeting.
I just needed to know, because a local landscaper came to me and wanted to know if he could talk to the committee about local and native plants.
The best way is for him to forward the comments to me, and I will distribute them to the commission. Our package is going out though this Friday, but as long as they get it to me before the meeting on Monday, so because it's just next week, I can give it to them as a handout, or they can attend the meeting. It is set up as a Teams meeting. It's in the mayor's conference room, so it's more of a casual setting, but it is online with that link, so they could link in, and then under audience comments, they could provide it there too, or they can come to the meeting.
Thank you. Hearing no other business to come before the commission,